Okay, so the inevitable has happened. Sheffield Wednesday are to enter administration. Now, we covered HM Revenue and Customs and the winding up order that they were applying through the High Court to enforce, which is basically how they get their tax that they're owed back, or the majority of the tax owed by the club back, because the club owes about £1 million, if not more, in unpaid tax. Now, under the ownership of Dayfron Chancery, the club has been late paying wages to players and non-paying playing staff on at least 5 separate occasions within the last 12 months. Now, there could even be more occasions where wages have been late or not paid in full, and that is an ongoing concern. Now, with the administrators now in, they will structure the club's debt with the creditors. It does kick the can down the road in regards to the winding up order petition a little bit. It does delay the tax bill sort of for a period of time, and it can also, with the administrators in, they can negotiate with HM Revenue and Customs about structuring the outstanding tax owed by the club. It also could mean that Dayfron Chancery may no longer be the owner in a very short space of time, and a new ownership group or owner potentially can be found. Now, with Exeter City, they were in a similar situation many years ago. The fans bought a stake in the club, and it's a very similar ownership model in Exeter City to the German 50+1 model that we hear a lot about. Now, not every German club has that model, but that's the trend in Germany. Now, so the fans potentially could get a fans trust and have a fan-led ownership. That is a potential, or partly fan-led ownership group. So that is a potential. New owners come in, stability is brought off the field, the debts are restructured, the tax bill gets sorted out because the tax is owed by the club, not by the owner. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Dayfron Chancery has other issues financially off the field. And that could be a positive outcome. New ownership, potential fan ownership, any number of things in regards to the administration. In that regard, in a positive sense, it will be a long journey back. It's going to take time for the club to stabilise it in that sense. And as someone who works with a lot of Reading fans, and what we saw obviously with the situation at Reading, the EFL forced a sale. They forced Dai Young to sell the club. They sanctioned him, said, no, you can't be an owner anymore, you've got to sell the club, here's your time frame to sell the club, be gone. So there is precedent for the Football League to say to Dayfron Chancery, you have to sell, we're going to deregister you as an owner. Now, in regards to the administration, there are positives, there are also negatives. The points deduction's one, and there is the potential of ongoing instability. So the administrators come in, new owners get found, or new investment gets found. It doesn't stabilise off the field, and administrators are called again in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, and the ongoing financial instability becomes a revolving cycle. And that is a potential outcome. And then, of course, the worst of all outcomes is the club goes bust, liquidated, ceases to exist. That is the worst outcome possible. And these are all outcomes that could happen. In regards to the EFL themselves, and I've ranted about this before, I'm not ranting today because I don't think it's necessary because I've covered it in the previous video. Questions do need to be asked about the to the EFL in regards to the director's test. How transparent is that director's test, and how the hell this guy, Chancery, managed to pass the director's test. Now, colloquially, a lot of fans call it the fit and proper persons test. I like to call it the unfit, improper persons test because this is the latest in a long line of football clubs that have ended up with a lot of off-field drama, financial instability, and quite frankly, not just dodgy ownership, but criminality in regards to the ownership. In Sheffield Wednesday, this is not their first rodeo with a dodgy owner. Milan Mandaric comes to mind. Now, I want to finish the video on a positive note as a sports fan. The first ever live sporting event I went to was a Sheffield Wednesday game at Anfield in 1996 on the 7th of December, the day after my 7th birthday, as a birthday present. Now, I'm not a Liverpool fan, I'm not a Wednesday fan, but that was the first time I went to a football match. In fact, it was the first time I'd ever seen live sport in the flesh. And I remember that day vividly, all these years later, from getting one of the early trains in the morning from London Euston up to Liverpool, getting lunch in the city centre, and then the taxi ride from the city centre down to Anfield, passing the park, seeing Goodison, and our taxi driver being an Evertonian. I remember it vividly, absolutely vividly, and then meeting all the players, both sets of players, the managers, and going around the trophy room. And And this sticks with a young kid, right? And Sheffield Wednesday, one of the oldest clubs in existence, founders of the Football League. And Sheffield Wednesday, Hillsborough, obviously there's the history there. And of course the Hillsborough disaster. But at the same time, as a kid growing up, Sheffield Wednesday, in my lifetime, have won silverware. In my lifetime, they've been a Premier League club. Admittedly, it's been a very, very long time since they were a Premier League club. But they were. They were a big club. They had Eric Cantona on their books at one point. The situation they find themselves in is disgraceful. And I fear bigger clubs, as in financial clout, that are currently in the Premier League, and I'm dropping hints here at some of the clubs in the Premier League, could also end up in a Sheffield Wednesday-like situation. Everton nearly ended up in this situation not that long ago under the previous ownership. Portsmouth, when they were a Premier League club, ended up in administration and relegated out of the Premier League, haven't been back. So we've been here before with some really big historical clubs, not just your Morecambes, your smaller former non-league clubs that have been to the Football League, achieved great things in the Football League and been that true underdog, making it up from the non-league to the Football League and unfortunately ending up back in the non-league. No. We're talking about clubs that are the cornerstone and the foundation of the sport that we've grown up to love all our entire lives. Questions need to be asked of the footballing authorities yet again about the process of ownership and how some of these bad characters, these dodgy characters, are allowed to own football clubs. Leeds have been here with Cellini. Wednesday have been here before with Milan Mandaric. So let's not kid ourselves. This is not the first time Sheffield Wednesday have had a crook as an owner. Let's be honest. Portsmouth. And then we can look at what happened to Bury. We can look at what happens to Macclesfield. We can look at, how Bolton nearly went, 2019. Derby County. A whole list of other clubs. Also north of the border as well. This is not just an England problem. North of the border. And Europe. This is happening continent-wide. And we still have to ask the questions about why, in this country, we in England and Wales at least, at the moment, we don't have the promised regulator that is meant to have happened by now. Why Scotland don't want to have an independent regulator, I find that weird considering some of the clubs north of the border and their financial situation that they're in. And look what's happening in Europe. And yet UEFA say that if we go ahead with this independent regulator, they could potentially block us from playing in the Euros in 2028 when we're co-hosting. They've actually threatened that because government legislation is going to have to be brought in to bring in the independent regulator. Even apart from that, the government's not going to be involved. But because there's political interference there, they see that as breaching UEFA FA kind of rules. But yet again, we are asking the question about football governance and how we've ended up in this situation. And as each, it pisses me off. Now, in the last video, I ranted a bit more. I'm not ranting this time. Really, I feel sorry for the players, the non-playing staff, and of course the fans. At the grassroots level, clubs are part of a community. Now, Sheffield is a two-club city. You are either the red and white or the blue and white. You're either United and you're a Blade, or you're an Owl and you're a Wednesday fan in the blue and white, right? One of the oldest rivalries, not just in English football, but in football in general. It's one of the oldest intercity rivalries, I think, after the Nottingham rivalry in Nottingham between County and Forest. And if Wednesday go, you've got the history, the rivalry, and the antagonism between the two clubs. But actually, if you think about it, I think Sheffield United fans would actually seriously miss Sheffield Wednesday as a club. They will miss that rivalry, and the rivalries are cornerstones of the sport, and the sport is being sold out. The sport is being gutted. Football has been gutted by weak governance and greed and corruption. Because how can you owe tax? How can you not pay your staff and yet be a multi-millionaire? Something has gone. You've got to ask questions. But there we go. Sheffield Wednesday entering administration. It's happened. It's happened quicker than I thought, but it's a sad day. But it's not necessarily the end of the world. There can be a bright light at the end of that tunnel if the administrators can find the right investors to come in, if they can structure the club's debt to make it, start paying off the club's debt, discuss with HM Revenue and Customs about the tax bill, and also get the fans on side. If you can get the fans on side, in regards to the process, and potentially, if enough fans can get together and club their funds in, you could potentially have a fan-led consortium, potentially a fan consortium, similar to Exeter City fan ownership, which could potentially invest in the club. Fans want the club to survive. And a club this the size of Sheffield Wednesday, if that goes bust, that is a really bad advert. Really bad advert, not only for the Football League, but football in general. One of the most historical clubs in the game. But thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below, and I will have some more content for you all very, very soon.